Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
That day was supposed to be just another regular ride down the bike path near downtown. Nothing special planned, just me and my bike enjoying the afternoon. I've been out for about an hour when I decided to head home. There's this shortcut through a parking lot that saves me maybe 10 minutes, so I cut through there like I always do. I'm pedaling along, minding my own business, when suddenly this car comes flying in out of nowhere. I'm talking at least 100 kilometers per hour in a parking lot. Nearly hit me dead on. I had to swerve so hard I almost fell off my bike. The car screeches to a stop about 2 feet in front of this elderly man who had to be at least 90 years old. The poor guy drops his salad wrap all over the ground and takes off running as fast as his old legs can carry him. My heart's pounding because I just almost got killed. And now I'm watching this terrified old man fleeing from some maniac driver. Here's where it gets interesting. I keep riding, still shaken up, and about 100 feet down the path I notice a police car tucked under a bridge. They must have seen the whole thing because they immediately pull out and head straight for the woman's car. 2 officers get out and approach the vehicle. I should mention the woman driving was African American, and so was one of the officers. This becomes important in a second. The woman gets out of her car, and I swear she has the audacity to act confused and ask what the problem was. The first officer, the African American one, just stands there for a moment like he can't believe what he's hearing. Then he tells her that she just almost killed an old man. She starts lying, claiming that the old man was on the other side of the parking lot. I'm standing there with my bike about 20 feet away, and I can't believe she's lying straight to their faces. She nearly ran over both me and that elderly man, and she's acting like nothing happened. The officers probably didn't see her almost hit me since I was invisible from their angle under the bridge, but they definitely saw what happened with the old man. Then she starts shouting, asking if they're going to make up some stupid lie to arrest her just because she's not white enough. I kid you not. She's accusing this African American officer of being racist against her. Both of them are the same race, and she's pulling the race card. The officer looks completely stunned. Before he can even respond to this nonsense, the back door of the car flies open, and this kid jumps out. He looks about 7 years old. I can see another smaller kid still strapped in a car seat and some guy in the passenger seat with his head in his hands like he's completely done with life. The 7-year-old runs up to the officer and starts punching and kicking him. The officer just stands there, barely acknowledging the kid, probably because what's a 7-year-old going to do, right? But then this kid does the craziest thing I've ever seen. He tries to grab the officer's gun. Thank God those holsters have locks on them because this kid is yanking at it, trying to get it out. The officer gently pushes him away without even looking directly at him. The kid barely moves, doesn't fall or anything, just gets nudged back a bit before running toward the car again. Karen loses her mind and screams at them not to touch her kid. The second officer tells her that her kid just tried to grab the first officer's gun. She yells back that the officer deserved it and calls him a jerk. I'm watching this unfold from my spot 20 feet away, and suddenly I hear the kid screaming again. Now he's grabbed the toddler's car seat with the toddler still in it, and he's swinging it at the second officer like a weapon. The first officer just grabs the car seat, sets it down safely away from the kid, and the little psycho starts punching and kicking again. And Karen, his mother, is encouraging him, telling him to get them and not to let them push him around. The first officer asks her, sounding exhausted, if she can please get control of her child. She shouts back, asking why she would tell her son to leave a jerk like him alone. By now, people are starting to notice the commotion. The officer picks up the kid and puts him back in the car, and suddenly there are about 10 people walking over, yelling at the officers to leave the kid alone. The elderly man who dropped his rap earlier comes back and starts shouting that the officers didn't do anything to the kid. I back him up because I saw the whole thing from the beginning. They'd been nothing but patient with that little terror. But Karen just keeps escalating, screaming at them to arrest her and calling the officer a racist piece of crap. Then more police cars start showing up. One car, then another, then another. I count about 30 officers eventually surrounding the situation, probably because there's now a growing mob of homeless people from the area shouting at the police. It's turning into a whole scene. I move to get a better view and accidentally block this guy eating chicken from the nearby restaurant. He can barely ask me to move because he's laughing so hard at the whole situation. I apologize and shift over so he can see. He's recording the whole thing on his phone, still cracking up. The police seem to realize this woman is about to start a full riot. They decide to let her go, probably to de-escalate. She heads toward her car, but then the passenger, her husband, steps out. He grabs her arm and screams at her for a solid minute. Nobody says a word except Chicken Guy, who's still laughing and recording. When the husband finishes, he walks back to the car but doesn't get in. Karen gets in the driver's seat and starts to pull away. Her husband yells at her to wait. She stops the car. He reaches in, grabs his takeout lunch from the passenger seat, and just walks away. Leaves her right there, doesn't look back. The mob dissipates pretty quickly after that. About 3 police cars quietly follow Karen so they can arrest her somewhere without causing another scene. I finally got back on my bike and rode home, but I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd just witnessed. That poor husband, those poor kids, and that elderly man who just wanted to eat his wrap in peace. 25 years old, married to an amazing man, with a beautiful 4-month-old son sleeping in the next room. Life should be perfect, right? Well, it mostly is, except for the fact that my body decided to betray me a couple weeks ago and land me in the emergency room. I didn't have the best relationship with my own mother. We're civil, but that's about it. There's no warmth there, no real connection. So when I married my husband, who's 21 years older than me, at 46, and met his mother, it felt like I'd finally found what I've been missing. She welcomed me with open arms, treated me like I was her own daughter from day one. I couldn't have asked for a better mother-in-law. She moved here from the UK recently, which means my son is her first grandchild she's gotten the chance to help raise. My husband has 3 older sisters, all successful women, teachers, nurses, and lawyers, but his mother never lived close enough to help with their kids. So when our baby was born, she was thrilled to finally be the hands-on grandmother she'd always wanted to be. 2 weeks ago, when I had to rush to the emergency room, she didn't hesitate. She came right over and took care of my son while my husband took me to the hospital. Everything went smoothly, or so I thought. Yesterday, she was over at our place, and I was completely exhausted. My son had been fighting sleep for what felt like hours, and I was at my wit's end. That's when she mentioned it so casually, like she was sharing a helpful tip. She told me that when she watched him last time, she put just a tiny bit of whiskey in his bottle to help him sleep. She explained that she'd done it with all her kids too, and that it worked perfectly. I must have looked shocked because she immediately started explaining that it was perfectly safe, just a drop or two, and that everyone did it back in the day. I took a deep breath. I knew she wasn't trying to hurt my son. My own grandmother had rubbed whiskey on my gums when I was teething. It was just what people did back then. But times have changed, and I needed to let her know gently. I told her I appreciated her honesty, but I asked if she knew that giving alcohol to babies wasn't considered safe anymore. I explained that doctors really advise against it now. The color drained from her face. She asked if I was serious. She apologized over and over and started panicking about how many times she'd done that with her own children. She kept saying they all turned out fine, but she suggested we take the baby to get checked out just to be safe. I told her to calm down and that we should wait until my husband got home to discuss it. I assured her I was sure our son was fine, but that we'd talk about it when he arrived. She was visibly shaken, apologizing repeatedly. I kept reassuring her that I wasn't angry, that I understood she didn't know any better, but she was upset with herself. When my husband got home that evening, I told him what his mother had confessed. I expected him to be understanding, maybe a little concerned, but mostly reasonable. Instead, he went pale. He asked me to repeat what she'd done, like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. I explained again that she'd put a little whiskey in the bottle to help our son sleep, and that she didn't know it wasn't okay anymore. I emphasized that she felt terrible about it. He said she'd never done that to him, or at least, he didn't remember her ever mentioning it. I reminded him that he was the youngest and probably wouldn't remember anyway. I pointed out that it was just considered normal back then, so she probably never talked about it much. But he was spiraling. He kept pacing back and forth, running his hands through his hair. He told me he didn't want her watching our son anymore. He said I should cancel my appointment next week and that he'd take the day off to watch our son himself. I protested, saying I couldn't just reschedule. I explained that this appointment was really important and that the doctor said I needed to come in soon to prevent complications from whatever sent me to the emergency room. He said we'd figure something else out then. He suggested getting a babysitter or asking a friend, but he insisted his mother wasn't watching our son. I argued that she'd made a mistake and didn't know any better, but now she did. I reminded him that she apologized immediately and even suggested we get our son checked out. I told him she wasn't being malicious. He said he didn't care. He asked what if she did something else we didn't know about, or what if there were other outdated practices she thought were fine. I told him that if that happened, we'd talk to her about them and educate her. I reminded him that she'd been nothing but loving and supportive since the day I met her, and that she'd been more of a mother to me than my own mother ever was. He responded that it didn't mean she got to endanger our son. I argued back that one tiny amount of whiskey, done out of ignorance, didn't make her dangerous. I explained that she was from a different generation, and they did things differently. I emphasized again that she immediately owned up to it and apologized. He said he couldn't believe I was defending her. I clarified that I wasn't defending what she did, but rather her intentions. I told him there was a difference. We went back and forth like this for over an hour. He was adamant that his mother couldn't be trusted, and I was equally adamant that she'd learned her lesson and deserved another chance. The next morning I called his mother and asked her to come over. When she arrived, my husband was there too. I convinced him to at least hear her out face to face. She walked in looking nervous and immediately launched into another apology. She said she would never intentionally harm her grandson and that she loved him more than anything. She explained she was just doing what she thought was helpful, what had worked for her own children. She said she understood now that times had changed and promised she would never do anything like that again. My husband stood there with his arms crossed, not saying anything. I told her I knew she didn't mean any harm and that I still wanted her to watch our son next week if she was comfortable with that. My husband immediately said absolutely not. His mother said it was okay and that she understood if he didn't trust her anymore. I said no, it wasn't okay. I told her she'd made a mistake, acknowledged it, and was clearly sorry. I said that should be enough. I turned to my husband and told him his mother had raised 4 incredibly successful children, including him. I reminded him he was a surgeon and that she obviously did something right. I said one outdated practice didn't erase decades of good parenting. There was a long silence. Finally, my mother-in-law spoke up. She suggested writing down a list of everything she remembered doing with her kids so we could go through it together and tell her what was still acceptable and what wasn't. She asked if that would help. My husband's expression softened slightly. He said he supposed that could work. I suggested that maybe he could stay here with her next week while she watched our son. I said that way he could see how she does things and feel more comfortable. He sighed deeply and said fine, but that he'd be watching everything. His mother nodded eagerly, relief washing over her face. She said of course, whatever made him comfortable. When she left that day, she hugged me tight and thanked me for standing up for her. I told her she was family and that's what we do. My appointment is next week, and for the first time in days I feel like I can relax. My son will be in good hands, and my husband will finally see what I already know. His mother is a good person who made an honest mistake. I graduated with my master's degree about 8 months ago, and I'm still drowning in student debt. Every dollar counts when you're trying to make rent, pay off loans, and still eat something other than instant noodles. I found this house with 2 roommates in a part of the city where street parking is like a blood sport. We had a driveway, an actual driveway. Sure, we shared it with 2 roommates, but it meant we could park our cars without circling the block for 40 minutes every night. The driveway situation was pretty straightforward. Our landlord had a detached garage at the very end where she kept her stuff. She controlled that garage and about 10 feet in front of it. Everything else, the whole stretch leading up to that area, belonged to us renters. It was in our lease, our responsibility, our space. The house sat on one side of the driveway, and an apartment building sat on the other side. We all worked different schedules and had different days off. Sometimes we walked to work, sometimes we drove. At any given time, there might be 3 cars lined up in that driveway, or just one, or none at all. It worked for us. Then one morning, I'm getting ready to walk to work when someone knocks on the door. I open it, and there are 2 men I've never seen before standing on my porch. They told me I needed to move my car. When I asked why, they explained that my landlord had given them permission to use the driveway because they were doing roofing work on the apartment building next door. I had no idea what they were talking about. Nobody had asked me about this. I told them to hold on and called my landlord right away. I asked her what was going on with these 2 guys at my door saying she gave them permission to use our driveway. She confirmed that the apartment building owner had asked if they could use the space in front of her garage for a dumpster while they replaced the roof. She'd said they could use those 10 feet, but she'd told them the rest of the driveway belonged to us tenants and they'd need separate permission from us. I told her they never asked us for permission. Now I had 2 men on my porch and a whole roofing crew that needed me to move my car, which I wasn't planning to move today. She basically shrugged it off and said I'd have to work it out with them. That was it. She just passed the whole problem on to me. I went back to the door and looked at these 2 guys. I told them I'd move my car that day, but they needed to compensate me for parking fees since I didn't have anywhere else to park for free. They looked at each other. My job didn't have a parking lot. Street parking in this area runs $15 to $20 a day. On my current budget, that's a lot of money. My roommates were in the same boat. They agreed to reimburse me for parking if I kept my receipts. They also said they'd only be there for a week, and once they got the dumpster in, we'd have full access to the driveway again. A week? That seemed manageable. I agreed. That was my first mistake. It wasn't a week. Not even close. The construction dragged on for a month and a half. During that time, they woke us up constantly to move our cars so they could park their trucks in our driveway. They went from promising us full access to telling us that if they threw debris from the roof and damaged our cars, that was our liability for parking there. They said they'd work from 8 to 5 each day, but my roommates often came home at 6 or 7 to find the roofing trucks still blocking the driveway. We'd circle the neighborhood for 30 minutes trying to find street parking. Some days we'd move our cars preemptively in the morning, paying for parking all day, and the roofing crew wouldn't even show up. It was costing us way more than we'd anticipated, and they kept breaking their promises. So we started keeping records. Every time they asked us to move our cars, we logged it. Every time they blocked the driveway, we logged it. We kept every single parking receipt. We documented every conversation we had with the company. I emailed our landlord after each interaction to keep her updated even though she made it clear she wouldn't get involved. We also kept track of our conversations with the apartment building owner. That guy was a piece of work. He told us the parking costs weren't a big deal and we should just eat them. When I pushed back, he said he'd work out a deal with the grocery store across the street to reserve 3 permanent spots for us. This grocery store is notorious for not having enough parking for its own customers. I laughed and told him to let me know how that went. He never brought it up again. My roommates and I also wrote up a memo detailing our agreement with the roofing company foreman. They'd pay us back all parking fees, plus $25 every time they asked us to move cars before 8 in the morning or after 5 in the evening. They'd also pay us for every day they went over schedule. Guess it was too good to be true. The project dragged on, and it became obvious they had no intention of paying us anything. We could see they were almost finished, and we knew they were going to try to skip out on the bill. Then one morning I left the house and a man I'd never seen before ran up to me. He demanded that I move my car and my roommate's car right away because they were removing the dumpster. The project was done. I told him we'd move them once we received our payment from the agreement. He asked what payment I was talking about. He said he was a personal friend of the apartment building manager and called over another man he claimed was the roofing company owner. Neither of them had been on site before. Neither had been part of any of our conversations about parking. They claimed they knew nothing about any agreement and accused me of extortion. The supposed friend was horrible. He kept calling me little girl in every sentence. He told me I wasn't getting a dime, that this was extortion, and that they'd sue me. I told him I'd be happy to be sued. I explained that I'd kept a log of every interaction, had written and dated materials backing up every conversation, and had time-stamped emails to my landlord documenting everything. Then I mentioned that I was also a lawyer. I don't practice law, but he didn't need to know that detail. They argued with my roommate and me for over an hour. I called her outside because if they were going to tag team us, I wanted backup. They tried everything. They screamed at us. They belittled us. They pleaded poverty and asked if we really wanted to bankrupt this poor roofing company because of our heartlessness. The friend argued we didn't deserve payment because we were technically able to park in the driveway at all times. We just chose not to because of liability. The owner argued at the same time that we didn't deserve payment because there were days our cars were in the driveway and that prevented them from working. When we pointed out that contradiction, they just moved to the next tactic. But here's the thing. This whole mess happened because the company and the apartment building owner never applied for the parking permits to reserve street spots for their trucks. They didn't do the preliminary work necessary for a construction job in a big city. They were forcing their way through a project they didn't have the proper permits to complete. My roommate and I reminded them of that fact, and they went quiet. Then they left to get the money. They came back and paid us everything we were owed. All the parking fees, all the inconvenience fees, everything we'd documented. Later that day, the company's foreman sent us an email calling us heartless witches and asking why we were so mean. We replied politely, thanking them for the payment, and told them that their right to use the driveway was terminated by 5 o'clock that day. If the dumpster was still there after that, we'd call to have it towed. It was gone by 4. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.